Hey class, so welcome to our last unit. Our last unit is graphing. We'll be focusing on graphing. To begin with, we'll be talking about plotting points today, and then we're going to move into table of values, filling in table values, and then lastly, we'll be looking at graphing lines coming up tomorrow. So today we're looking at Cartesian coordinate system. It is based on the idea that you have two number lines that overlap. So here we have our y-axis, and that gives us numbers. And we have our x-axis, and these two cross right here. And this coordinate is 0, 0, and is known as the origin. So when you're plotting points, you start with your pencil here, and then you're counting squares in different directions. So for the x-axis, you're plotting left and right. These will be positive numbers, and these will be negative numbers. And then up or down, like the thermometer, these will be positive numbers, and going in this direction, you'll have negative numbers. For our points, we always have our x value first, separated by a comma. Yes, that comma must be there. And then we have our y number. And it is a point, a coordinate, and it must be in brackets. So, read this real carefully, a little bit of history on the Cartesian coordinate system. It's relatively new math, pretty new, 17th century, but this is a huge part. This goes into grade 11, grade 12, into university, and we tie this with trigonometry, and then that leads us into calculus. So we have four quadrants. We have quadrant 1. In quadrant 1, all these points have a positive x value and a positive y value. Quadrant 2, all these points have a negative x value and a positive y value. And quadrant 3, all these points have a negative x and a negative y. Quadrant 4, our x value is going to be positive and our y value will be negative. Remember, points always are x, y. X's move left to right, and the y's tell you how many go up or down. So if you're looking at this point here, we'll call this 2, 1. This is point A. So you'd count 1, 2 spots, and that would be your x coordinate. Count up 1, that is your y coordinate. You put that point there, and that is 2, 1. Now, since we have the letter A, you could just label it with the letter, and then we know the value by looking over to the side. So there's point A. All points, your x value, count that first, your y value, count next. What if we had a fraction though? Say we had a fraction of 1/2, comma, negative 2. Negative 2.1. Well, 1/2, you would go over right in the middle. So now you're on this imaginary line. You're actually not going to be on the corner of a grid. A negative 2.1 means you go down 1, 2, and a little bit more. And so this we could then call maybe point B, and so we label this point right here B. And you're not on any lines. You're kind of coordinated off into the middle of nowhere. And you totally can plot those points. What we want to do is we want to avoid those, and that's what we're going to focus on when we're graphing lines. Because we can only guess where those go, where we know exactly when we plot a point in the corner of a grid. This would be exact. Okay, so here is just talking about points. This is your x, this is your y. You cross on the x and y axis. Okay, so again, this is your x-axis. Let me label that properly. And this would be up and down. This would be your y-axis. Together they are called, okay, plural. And you're going to see this, plural, you use axes with an E. Okay, so axis is singular, but if you're talking about both of them, that would be plural because there's two of them and you use the name axes. So you can now go and fill out this sheet. You have all the info to fill this out. You can also do this tuba worksheet. And now you're going to go on to this one, graphing from a table of values. So a table of values is right here. Okay, this here is your table of values. Now your x is known as your input, and so what we do is we input this number into our equation, y equals 3x minus 4, and from that what we do is we find the output value. So the output value is the y. So once we do our math, we'll know that value. So for the first one, we would take y equals 3x minus 4. We would then keep everything the same, but substitute in with brackets, must have brackety brackets, the negative 3 value. And that way we know it's a multiplication, and then we have to go and do our subtraction. And so that equals negative 13. So that is our output, negative 13. So then we can find the next input and output value. So now we have negative 2. So we are going to put the negative 2 value into our equation. So we will get y equals 3x minus 4, and our x value is negative 2. Whoops, I forgot my 3. So 3 times negative 2 minus 4, y equals negative 6 minus 4, y equals negative 10. And so that is your output value, negative 10. So you can do it again for the next one. So here we have negative 1. Substitute that in. Y equals 3x minus 4. Yes, please take the time to do this little bit of work. This gets much more difficult in grade 10. You want to make sure this is solidified in your brain. And y equals negative 7. Now, what I want you to see is I want to see a bit of a pattern. Being able to recognize patterns as math has helped mathematicians discover new trends and possibilities. So when you're looking at this right now, what you want to see is you want to change in the x and the y values. What you should see is that each time here we are going up by 3 and 3. We are going up by 3, but over here we are going up by 1. And so if we completed this pattern and went up by 3 again, we would have negative 4. Well, let's check and see if this is correct. Y equals 3 times 0 minus 4. Y equals 0 minus 4. This happens a lot, folks. Notice that it's multiplying by 0. And we get a negative 4 output value for y. There we go. So now you can complete this chart. Once you've verified and you know it's accurate, you could just complete. So add 3, add 3, add 3. There you go. Okay? And so that's what we're going to do. If I give you these input values, you find the output values. You can do the exact same thing for the next equation. Before we do that, though, I want to show you two things. Here's your rate of change. Your rate of change is 3 over 1, and that equals simply 3. You can actually find this number in your equation in front of x. It's going to be really important to see that, especially next year, over and over again. Now, what about our constant? Our constant is a value that never changes. So when our input is 0, our constant's value is negative 4. That's another important thing to see. What is your y value when x is 0? Because in next year, we're just going to be graphing with those two pieces of information. Now, to graph, what you would do is you would make points. So I would plot these points. I would plot, let's start with 0, negative 4. Then let's start with negative 1, negative 7. And then we can go negative 2, negative 10. And then we can't graph anymore, and that's okay. But now we can go in the other direction. So we can plot 1, negative 1, whoops, right here. And then we can plot 2, positive 2. That's up here. And then we can plot 3, positive 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There we go. And so now what we have to do is we have to make a line. So we have now points that make a line. So when we make a line, it's really important. We're going to go over this and review this over and over. But your line should go through all your points. Okay? And it should go two things. Number one, it should use arrowheads. Arrowheads show you that's a line. It goes forever. Okay? So it's really important to use arrows. And what I also always do, is I go from the edge of the grid to the edge of the grid. It's really important to do that. edge of the grid to the edge of the grid. Both those things, you can see I'm overlapping here and I'm overlapping here. Those two things communicate that this line goes forever and ever. It never stops in both directions. Okay. We'll go more over that later on. But here what I want you to do is I want you to practice another table of values. So you have to find your inputs and outputs. So your input is -3. So y equals -2 times -3. Plus 5. And this is using the input x equals -3. You substitute it in for your x value. And so you do a little bit of math, always writing it down because you don't want to make mistakes. Try and be perfect like Mr. Barker. And there's your output value. Then we go and do the next one. Okay, so the next one, our output will be -2. So y equals -2 times 2. Sorry, -2 plus 5. So y equals 4 plus 5. Y equals 9. And so that can go there. And then we can go on and do x equals -1. So multiply by -1. And you can get 2 plus 5, y equals 7. And I can look and see that I'm going up by 2 each time. And so then I can continue the pattern, 5, 3, 1, -1. Sorry, I'm going down by 2 each time. Sorry, my bad, -2. Good. And so here I'm going up by 1 each time. So now my rate of change, ROC, that's going to equal -2 over 1, so that equals -2. And then you can see your rate of change right there in that position. What about your constant? So when you have x equals 0, what's your y value? It equals +5. And you can see that right here. Those two numbers are going to be very, very important next year. They're going to really help you graph. Okay. So now you can do the next worksheet as well, but let me do one example with you. So here's the worksheet. Why did Zorna pour ketchup on her brother's hand? Let's do this one first. So this one here is, you're not going to have a constant rate of change. So for each one, you're just going to practice finding your output values of y. So let's start here. X equals 1, so we get y equals -2x. Y equals -2 times 1. So y equals -2. So you put a -2 value here. Okay. And wherever you see a -2, that's going to give you what's going on here? Oh, so -2 value, that's going to be the letter H. So part here, number 1 is the letter H. There you go. Let's do the next one right here. So y equals -2 times 4. So y equals -2 times x. And we substitute in x equals 4. And so what does y equal? Y equals -8. So this is -8. I'm writing sideways here. And so for question number 2, what for -8, you write an E. So number 2, we write an E. And we made the letter he. Okay, when you're doing these word phrases, once you get the words, you can just split them to make it easier to see your word phrase at the end. Next one, -5. I'll do it just for kicks and giggles. Y equals -2 times x. Y equals -2 times -5. Y equals +10. So let's see the letter for +10. It's right here. It's an R. So for question number 3, I write the letter R. There you go. Her. So maybe it's not a he, maybe it's a her. We'll find out. You complete this puzzle. So you got a couple things to do. Number 1, you're completing this part of the worksheet. I'll put the answer key up. Please self-check your answers. This worksheet you can self-check by making a phrase. Okay, so you'll be making a phrase right here. And down here, just working with a table of values, substituting in, finding your numbers, and then putting the letters down there. Okay, there you go. Good luck, enjoy, have fun.